Ciao a tutti and welcome to this week's edition of the Trequartista podcast. I'm joined with just Noah Curtis tonight. We have Mike, but he's actually wearing the producer's hat right now. He's off camera. He's actually feeling a little down right now. I don't know if he's got a cold or the flu. Hopefully it's not the flu.
Sinus infection.
Maybe the sinus. I'm Giuseppe LaRocca, and I thank you guys for joining us this week. We have a very intense week on the Trequartista podcast. Obviously, the Mercato has finished up, and it's left us with a ton of storylines. One storyline we will get to is Quagliarella, who has just recently been left out of the Juventus Europa League squad. Kind of tasty, huh?
Tasty or maybe bitter, depends on.
Well, it's a tasty story I'm talking about.
It's tasty for us in the in the podcast.
In the podcast community, we're licking our lips about this story. Also, since we were last on, Osvaldo joined Juve. And I know last week on the podcast, we didn't think it was going to happen. Well, it indeed did. And he was wearing the black and white this weekend against Inter. So that's a story we will cover as well. Inter lose the Derby d'Italia. Seems like there's turmoil there, but they brought in Hernanes. That's another storyline we'll cover. What's the feeling at Inter right now? Is the ship going to steady a little bit, or is it just going to lead to more turmoil? Also, Napoli. Looks like they took the week off against Atalanta this past week and rested for the Coppa Italia. Also, some storylines coming out of there with Paolo Cannavaro, the flag of the team for the past few years, headed to Sassuolo. And we also have a transfer market recap. I think later on we'll talk a little transfers and some Cellino. I know you want to talk about some leads, right?
Yeah, why not?
He's already given you tons of storylines for the first few weeks. And also on the show tonight, very special, he's making his 2014 debut on the Trequartista podcast. Basically, our fourth cast member, David Amoyal, will be joining us after the break. So we will break shortly and get right into the Quagliarella Juve story.
That's nice.
All right, everybody, you heard the music. That means only one thing. We're talking about Quagliarella. Joining us tonight from GianlucaDiMarzio.com and now Italian Football Daily, the one, the only, David Amoyal.
Great to be on, guys. Thanks for having me.
You know, it's great having you. It's always nice hearing your voice every once in a while, you know? No? Nobody else agrees?
No, I agree. No, I definitely agree.
Anyway, David, you obviously have a background with Juventus. You know a lot about what's going on with the team. It seems kind of strange coming from, the Marotta and Conte camp to hear something like Quagliarella being upset with Juventus at the time. What can you tell us about this story? What's accurate, and is Quagliarella on his way out from Juve?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, in the past few days, the media in Italy is making a lot of conjecture on his condition. He supposedly had the flu since last week. On Thursday, he left practice, and it was the day before the transfer deadline. The last day, basically the last 2 days of the transfer market, he left practice. There were some people in Italy who went as far as saying he left practice to head to Milano to go take a medical for Inter. That right away sounded odd to me because Quagliarella had a very poor relationship with Mazzarri, who is Inter's current coach, when both of them were at Napoli. So when he had the flu the first time, the media made a big deal out of it. Today, again, he practiced separately from the team. Some media in Italy ran with the story and said, okay, now they're freezing him off the roster the way they did with Iaquinta. He's practicing alone. He's away from his team. Marotta for Juve came out and said that's not true. He just has the flu, so he was practicing separately. So that's, there's been a lot of people drawing conclusions on what's going on with him because of the flu and missing practice. But I can tell you it's been a really rocky week for him. When the Vucinic-Guarin swap seemed very close to be complete, in a way, I could see Quagliarella moving up in the pecking order at Juve, with Vucinic leaving and Guarin arriving. Maybe Juve wouldn't have even tried to get a striker to improve the team because Guarin can play as an offensive midfielder. I could have seen Conte in a desperate situation with injuries just going with the 3-5-1-1 that he used at the end of last season. So when the Vucinic-Guarin deal looked almost done, to me it seemed Quagliarella's standing at Juve would have gone up. Then the Osvaldo deal came out of nowhere, and I know it's a deal that surprised a lot of people. I wasn't that surprised because during the whole Mercato, both Marotta and Conte said that they were looking at opportunities. They weren't that interested. The team didn't have any needs, so they weren't really looking, how can we improve the team? They were just looking at opportunities, and Guarin and Osvaldo are two players that they have liked for a while. Conte has been following Osvaldo since 2005 when he was at Lecce, right. So that's a player that he likes. So once Osvaldo came, Quagliarella fell down in the pecking order.
I gotta ask you, can you confirm that Quagliarella asked to leave Juventus in either this transfer window or the previous transfer window?
No, I don't think that's true at all, and I'll tell you why. Because once the Osvaldo deal was very close and it was completed Friday morning, but basically Thursday night it was a deal that was pretty much done, Juve told Quagliarella, listen, Osvaldo's going to be the first bench player after Tevez and Llorente, so you're going to be way behind in the pecking order. So they tried shopping him. He had offers. He turned down a move to Cardiff in the EPL, and on Friday, Genoa made offers for loan for both Quagliarella and Giovinco, and neither of them accepted the move. So I don't think it's true at all that he asked for a trade. If anything, I think this proves the opposite. He knew that with Osvaldo coming, he really wouldn't have had a chance to play, and he still wanted to stay at Juve. I think, there's a couple of reasons for that. Players don't like leaving teams in the middle of the season, for one. Quagliarella has strong ties to the city of Turin. He's spent a lot of time in the city, and also players at Juve are eligible for big bonuses if you win the Scudetto, so I think Quagliarella didn't want to pass those up. If you want to call him a mercenary for that, go ahead. I wouldn't go that far. So I don't think it's true at all that he requested a trade. If anything, I think he wanted to stay, and now the Osvaldo arrival has made it very hard for him.
Okay, no, I got to ask you. So you hear David saying that basically when Osvaldo came in, maybe Conte, Marotta gave him that third spot, that third striking spot. Looking at Osvaldo, Vucinic, and Quagliarella, how do you rate them all? I mean, for me, to be completely honest, I don't see Osvaldo as that much of an improvement or that much better than Quagliarella, personally. But how do you feel about the man?
I think they're kind of different players. I mean, Osvaldo's a guy that's capable of scoring a lot of goals, but I think he's the type of player that also doesn't necessarily need the service, but I think he's going to play a lot better when people are going to give him opportunities to finish off moves and finish off plays. And Quagliarella, to me, is a player that's almost kind of unfortunately for him, but he's capable of kind of coming in and changing the game very quickly, and he's able to kind of be a playmaker, create plays for himself, create things for other people. And I think that kind of oftentimes relegates him to this like substitute kind of role because he's good at it. But I think they're not really the same player, but I think in a way, if I had to say what Juve needed, I would say they would. In my opinion, I feel like Quagliarella can be he might be a little bit more of a change up from Llorente and Tevez to me than Osvaldo is. And Osvaldo's a fine player. I mean, I think it's his acquisition was almost the definition of like what you would consider a luxury purchase or a luxury buy. He's a quality player, not someone that a spot that Juventus needed. For Quagliarella, I think I like the skill set. I like what he brings, and I think he brings a different dimension to Juve that can be useful. But at the same time, if Juve feel like maybe they need another guy that can kind of lead the line and play a little higher up the field, Osvaldo is going to fit that a lot better than Quagliarella is.
Right. And with Quagliarella, he seems to be a player that, like you said, doesn't mind coming off the bench and playing that game.
Well, I don't know if he doesn't mind. I think
he's done it for almost 2 years now.
He can do that role, and sometimes it's almost they're too good at it and they kind of play themselves out of minutes in a way. But he's extremely good in that role. It's not an easy thing to do to come off and get into that pace of the game after an hour, and have 30 minutes to make an impact. He's a player that can do that.
Right.
I don't really think Osvaldo's that type of player. I saw in the beginning of the year he came off the bench a few times for Southampton and didn't really feel like he was in the pace of the game. That's in the Premier League, and it's obviously a different situation. But I think Osvaldo's somebody that I feel like would start a game and maybe not finish it, as opposed to coming in the middle of the game. I don't think he's necessarily that guy that's going to come in and dynamically make a lot of plays. I think he's someone that you could throw up top if you needed a goal.
Right.
He's certainly capable of scoring, and he's comfortable in Serie A, so it's a nice purchase. I don't know if it really affects the spots that Quagliarella would be in, though. If it does, then maybe Juve are looking for a little different aspect in the attack. I don't know, but it doesn't sound like they feel like they need the skill set that Quagliarella is bringing.
No,
at least
I agree, but I also feel that they don't need the skill set that Osvaldo brings. I'm going to make this point, David. You might disagree with me, but I'm interested to hear what you think. I think in terms of the mercado or this transfer period, I think Juve took a step backwards. The moves, moving De Ceglie and Motta out, that made a lot of sense. They wanted to offload, right? And you said earlier that they were looking for opportunities, and Osvaldo presented an opportunity. But in bringing Osvaldo in, who would be a sixth striker at this point, right, or a fifth striker at this point, you also ostracize two players who have given you a lot over the last 2.5 seasons. We're talking about Vucinic, who in the Conte era has been the best striker. I don't think there's a comparison. And Quagliarella, who's your best European striker thus far, and a player who, off the bench, has done some brilliant things for Juve. I still feel that Juve took a step backwards. I don't think the Osvaldo move was necessary. In fact, I just think you're bringing in somebody who's a locker room problem child, right? So that's my opinion. How do you think Juve did this transfer window?
Well, I think, the timing of the moves is a big factor. I think, in an ideal world, Juve would have brought in Osvaldo with at least one of their strikers leaving, maybe even ideally two of them leaving because they have no Champions League and no Coppa Italia. But I wouldn't underestimate the fact that Conte has really been following Osvaldo for a long time. I was reading that he was following him back from the days that Osvaldo was playing for Zeman at Lecce. Conte, too, talked about bringing in Osvaldo would kind of shake things up a little bit in the front line, bring more competition and motivation. I think the fact that the Osvaldo deal was done on the last day of the Mercato made things a little bit harder as far as moving players. I think, as far as what happened with the Europa League list, it's really important to note that Giovinco is a homegrown player, and if you have a homegrown player, you can have extra people on the list. So I don't think it was so much Juve saying, "Oh, Quagliarella's worse than Giovinco." It just made sense to have Giovinco on that list over Quagliarella. I personally like the Osvaldo move. It would have been ideal had Juve been able to flip Vucinic for Guarin and have both on the roster. I think that would have been the ideal move. But I think Juve sees having Osvaldo on the team now on their terms. They're getting him on a free transfer. He cut his salary considerably to come. He desperately wanted to come to Juve. He had other offers. Inter and Valencia made the same offer to Southampton that Juve made, but he chose Juve. So I think Juve kind of has him in an ideal situation. I think Conte is the right coach for him. He joins the locker room with Pirlo, Buffon, Vidal. He's not a starter. He's not counted on as being the symbol of the team. So this move makes some sense to me, but I think, in an ideal world, they would have flipped either Vucinic or Quagliarella or Giovinco, or maybe two of them. I'm in agreement with everything you say on Quagliarella. I think Juve fans in general don't give him enough respect.
No.
He can be frustrating. He plays like someone on FIFA 14 that has a broken pass button, like he just won't pass the ball, but he's also scored some huge goals. Only Vidal has more goals in the Champions League in the past 2 years, so I think Quagliarella's done a lot for Juve, but I think they see getting Osvaldo now on their terms as a good move for the future. The option to buy is set at 19 million, but like Marotta said on Sunday, that's just an arbitrary number. They can negotiate that down. I feel like that number was just used for Southampton to save some face. They basically have an option to buy for the amount that they spent on Osvaldo, but to me, that's just an arbitrary number. So I agree with you. In an ideal world, they would have made some other moves, but I kind of like the Osvaldo move for Juve. The only downside that I do see with what's going on is the war of words that Juve is getting in with his agent, Beppe Bozzo. There's been some back and forth. And Bozzo is really an important player in the transfer market in Italy. He represents a lot of guys. Marchisio is one of his clients. So, I think Juve is going to have to smooth that over eventually. But I think Osvaldo's a decent move. Personally, I'm sad to see that his arrival hurts Quagliarella, who's one of my favorite players. But, I do see what Juve is doing here.
I think the thing, too, with Osvaldo, I mean, it's a situation like you say. He wanted to come to Juve, and I take some of that with a grain of salt because he also said that he dreamed of playing for Southampton.
He's been on 7 teams in 7 years.
He's dreamed of playing for a lot of different teams, but I think David's right in the sense that he's coming into a culture that's he's not being looked at as the guy to run the team. When Southampton bought him, I believe he was their record transfer buy ever.
Yeah,
so you come with that price tag, you come with that kind of for a club like Southampton that's not a big club in England, that's kind of this year is punching above their weight or was punching above their weight. He was a flagship signing of a new era, and I think that for a player like Osvaldo, for his attitude, it gives him a sense of entitlement that he's kind of bigger than the squad, and I think that ultimately that and a lot of stuff behind the scenes at Southampton kind of deteriorated things. I think here, if he came into this Juve locker room and he tried to act like that, I don't think the veterans of that club would have a problem putting him in line. I don't think Juve would have a problem saying, all right, if you want to act like that, you can go. Not
to compare these two locker rooms, but he was also at Roma, where you had veterans like Francesco Totti and De Rossi, and he still ran into a ton of problems. Punched Lamela, or I don't know if he punched Lamela, but you got a fight with Lamela on the field.
It's not to say that he won't. I think that, like David said, Juve didn't go into the transfer window looking for him or thinking he was a guy. But sometimes when a player of his level of talent becomes available, you kind of do a quick risk reward and you say, do we need him? Maybe we don't need him. Is he going to help us? They obviously think that he will, right? And then they look at it and they say, what happens? If worst comes to worst, this guy gets in another bust up with some player here.
Then we
can ship him out. We don't need him. We don't need him to win a Scudetto. We don't need him to be a.
I agree with you that.
So I agree with you. I look at it that way. But I think that again, like David said, I think the plan was that Vucinic wasn't expected to be on the team anymore. Maybe Giovinco, maybe Quagliarella
as well. But that plan blew up, though.
It did.
It blew up. And
you got to think.
If you're saying that it's a good move for Osvaldo, absolutely this is a good move for Osvaldo. Nobody's going to argue that. Why wouldn't he want to play for Juventus? And why wouldn't he want to play with the champions that they have on the team? He's going to have a better shot of making the national team this way as well. But for Juventus, are you really that much better? Was the move really that necessary?
No,
I see it as an opportunity, but what you got out of Osvaldo, I'm sure you could get out of Vucinic and Quagliarella in tandem with some Giovinco as well. You got to think about it
this way too, though, is that I think that it's unlikely that Vucinic will be back on the team at the beginning of next year. I think that he kind of sees he's not. I don't think he's stupid. I think he kind of understands. They brought in a player in Osvaldo. The writing might be, maybe he feels like the writing is on the wall from there. Maybe Quagliarella feels the same way. if Juve was talking about those players leaving, if those players were approached to leave, and now a new signing comes in, you don't think those players are thinking, at the end of the season I might have to move on. So I think that, does it make Juve exponentially better? No, it doesn't. But I don't think it makes it any worse. I think that Quagliarella and Vucinic are professionals. If they're called on to play, I'm sure they'll go out there and give their all. They want to win. They obviously want to, if they're going to be moving on, you want to make sure your stock's high.
Yeah.
Quagliarella is going to try to make a World Cup, you know what I mean? So I think that, I don't think it really hurts them. To me, I don't presume to know the tactics or what Conte is kind of thinking, but I think that Osvaldo I think it signals to me that they're thinking about how they want to do things attacking-wise a little differently than maybe they, with Quagliarella.
Why though? I get it, but
I mean, that's
they're putting up 3-4 goals a game. I don't really. Let me ask you a question, David. Giovinco, Vucinic, Quagliarella. Do you see them all moving on at the end of the season?
I think there's a good chance. I think Juve is going to keep Berardi on another team next season. They also co-own Gabbiadini and Immobile. They do have a lot of options. It's amazing how difference 1 year makes. This time last year, Juve was in a panic over strikers. We can't get strikers. We need strikers, and now they have an incredible abundance of it. I think Juve, part of the reason they brought in Osvaldo is just to have options, and they're going to take the next 4 or 5 months to kind of see how the players that are on their roster now perform, and also to keep their eye on Berardi, Immobile, and Gabbiadini. So my gut tells me probably at least 2 out of Vucinic, Giovinco, and Quagliarella will be gone. Let's see what happens, but that would be my guess. I just wouldn't underestimate how much Conte believes in Osvaldo. I mean, I think you guys all make some really, really valid points, but Conte seems to really have pushed for this move, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on this one and see how it plays out. And I'll also tell you that starting tomorrow, the campaign to bring Quagliarella to Boston is officially starting. So, we might just bring him here.
Yeah, why not? As a Revolution fan,
we should somehow.
I would complain about having a player like that. We should probably move on though from.
Yeah, David, we want to thank you for coming on. You can find David on Italian Football Daily. You can find him on gianlucadimarcio.com. At David Amoyel is his Twitter handle. David, anything else to plug?
Nothing. I just want to thank you guys. Always a pleasure to be on. I look forward to collaborating more with you guys this year. And a big thank you to all my Twitter friends. January was incredibly intense, but incredibly rewarding as well. So thank you to everyone, and thanks to you guys.
All right, David.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for coming on. We are going to take a quick break, and right after that, we'll talk some Inter, Napoli, and we will finish up with some transfer market recap. All right, so let's talk some Inter, Noah. They lose to Juventus 3-1, and it was a handed 3-1 defeat as well. The match went Juventus' way. To Juve's credit, I think we've talked about them enough, but just like in the Roma match, just like in the Napoli match and the Milan match, they scored within the first 15 minutes and really controlled the match from there. For Inter, they came into this match with a lot of questions, right? They actually had rocks thrown at their bus when they were leaving Milan to go to this match. This club, this organization right now, looks like it's in turmoil, right? They brought in Hernanes. They brought in Nani as well, right? So yeah. So right now, what does Inter really need to do to progress? Because it's looking pretty terrible right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's issues with the squad, but I think, you know, you look at the table. I mean, they're sitting now down in 6th place, but they're only 2 points out of 5th.
Right.
You know, now they're way off the top 4 here. So I don't know if they're going to be able to get into that top 4, but they're in 6th place. I know that's not kind of the standing that Inter fans obviously want, or where you maybe expect a club with that pedigree to be. But let's also remember that they had a change in ownership, and that's going to change kind of the money that's available, maybe the identity of the club a little bit, the direction the club is going in. They have a new manager that's not even finished 1 year there. They're adding new players to the squad at the beginning of the season, during the middle of the year, and it seems like we kind of all could agree that maybe they're trying to phase out some of the older faces and trying to bring in some new ones to assume those roles. So I think it's a little too early, and I understand the fans' frustration, but to me, I think that you kind of have to have a little bit of patience. I know that's not an easy thing to say, but I think that in Mazzarri, you have a manager that's proven he can manage in Serie A, and he can manage a club into the Champions League. He's done, he did that.
For sure.
I think if he's given adequate funds and adequate time, and we don't know that about Thuhir, obviously, but if that's a possibility, I think the club can improve, and I think they could improve very much next year with the right, with the right moves. But I think to say that the club is in a crisis, they're going through a rough patch. There's no doubt about it, but they're still in 6th place, and at the beginning of the year, frankly, I felt like they were going to finish in 5th or 6th place. And that's right, exactly where they're at. I think that at the end of this year, if they're in the top 5, I would say Mazzarri's done a pretty damn good job. And so I don't really look at it like the club is having a problem. They brought in a player, Nani, that's definitely can be frustrating to watch if if he's on your team, but he's obviously got talent.
Yeah.
A player they bring in a player in Hernanes that we both agreed would be a good move for Inter. So with the right pieces there, you bolster the back line a little bit, you bolster the attacking options. To me, the thing that the club is crying out for now, that I was saying a month or so ago, they needed some attacking playmakers. It seemed like they've added those guys.
Yeah, yeah.
So now I think they need to get a goal scorer. I love, some of the, Milito and these guys are nice players, but they're not consistently healthy. They're not banging in the goals. So now you've got these playmakers. Now let's give them someone that can score. And I know that's easier said than done, but I think Inter's not necessarily moving in the wrong direction right now based on...
I agree. And this is the deciding factor, right? And before I talk about the players, one thing that I really can't stand, but it's an inevitable truth, and that happens in Serie A more so than the other leagues, is that short-term mindset.
Oh, sure.
And we've seen that absolutely kill teams in the past. My brother, poor kid's a Palermo fan, right? Lorenzo, he was talking about it last week. That short-term mindset from Zamparini ultimately had the club go to Serie B, right? And we see Inter, Milan trying to stay out of the headlines and firing and hiring just to really steady a ship. And it's all a short-term mindset. But if you look at some of the best teams in Serie A, or some of the most consistent teams in Serie A, I'm looking at Napoli as of the last couple of years when they kept Mazzarri, Guidolin at Udinese, Juventus, of course. When you believe in a manager and you give him time, despite what he gets early on, despite all the critics, maybe the losses early on, if you give a manager time, he's a professional manager, right? You got to think that he can put something together. In Mazzarri, you know that he's been able to put something together on a squad and on a budget, much less with Napoli than you have now, right? Napoli wasn't much, 5-6 years ago. It was a team coming from Serie B that ended up becoming a Champions League team, and that's really attributed to Mazzarri's plan. Mm-hmm. The question for Inter is are they going to have that short-term mentality? Are they going to, be afraid after a couple more losses, or give in to the fans, rock throwing, things like that? Are they going to take to that? Because if they do, they're not going anywhere. They're going to switch managers. They're going to be at the same place they are now.
Right.
Ultimately, it comes down to not having that short-term mindset. In terms of the players, we talked about Hernandez. That's a player that they brought in, and I think he's going to fit the mold perfectly. He can create from the back, but he can also become an attacking player as well, shoot from range. A very versatile player in the midfield, something that Mazzarri likes. And also Nani. One of the things that Mazzarri brought to Inter was his 3-5-2 formation that he tailored in Napoli. He hasn't really been able to run that formation effectively, and Nani gives them that winging option now, right? Somebody dynamic on the outside who can cut in or who can bring it down the flanks. This is very critical, and you have poachers in front now, right? You have Milito, you have Palacio who can poach in front. I think these are two great moves that Inter make. Again, it just goes back to the mindset. Are they going to believe in Mazzarri? Are they going to give him more than a year? Are they going to give him a project and actually believe in the project? That's what it all comes down to for Inter. Whatever's going on right now, the rock throwing, the people, pointing fingers at Milan, the tabloids, this and that. Really, the tabloids are a combination of two things. Yes, Inter is not really performing well, but Milan got a new manager, so they're giving them the benefit of the doubt right now, right? So they're going to shift it to the other Milan side. If they don't give in to that right now, and they believe in Mazzarri, I think only good things about Inter. I think that they have a chance. And if they hit that 5th place spot, good for them. I think 5th place would be great for them this year. They're not better than the first 4 teams. They aren't. They're not better than Fiorentina, Napoli, Roma, or Juventus. So 5th place for me, for Inter, is perfect, I think. Right?
Look, I mean, these 3 games, they lose to Genoa, they tied Catania, and they lost to Juve. In those 3 games, they concede 4 goals, which isn't great.
No.
But they scored 1 goal in 3 games. And we talk about, you mentioned Rodrigo Palacio and Diego Milito. Palacio has 10 goals this year in 22 games, which puts him on pace for about 15 goals, which isn't a bad return. Diego Milito has 2 goals this year.
Well, Diego Milito was also injured.
Well, right,
of the season,
but we say that every year.
Yeah,
it's time.
Great point.
Great point. Bottom line is the 2 forwards that we mentioned have a combined 12 goals, and that's about a goal every other game, and that's just not going to cut it. And when I look at the forwards they have on the roster now, Mauro Icardi and Belfodil are 2 young, talented players, right?
Yeah, Belfodil is gone.
Players
He's gone.
we like.
Yeah.
I think that if you add another forward in there, and if Milito gives you anything or whatever, but they need another forward, and it's just not available to them right now. And maybe it will be in the summer. But to me, what Inter should be focusing on is consolidate your spot in the top 5. Get that 5th spot.
Absolutely.
And if they get the 5th spot, I think you go to Mazzarri and you say, all right, what we can add. Maybe they don't have that budget they used to have, but you can say, well, we can get you one kind of blue chip player.
Yeah.
Right? What do you want? And I think if Mazzarri was smart, he would sit there and he would say, I need a striker. I need someone that's going to score me 15-plus goals that we can rely on to score goals, because we have the playmakers now. And we just mentioned the guys they brought in, but they have other playmakers already in the squad, too. Mazzarri says, I can figure out the defense. We can make the defense work. I need a forward. I need one. If they can go get him that forward, that's a team that's going to be dramatically improved just with that ability to get consistent goal scoring, because right now they don't. So I think that's the biggest thing. Patience it's not easy for fans, and it's kind of your right as a fan to overreact to things, I think, in a way. But it's not the right for the ownership to do that, right? You don't want to overreact. I think the worst thing they could do is let a good, solid manager like Mazzarri go now. If this team was in the bottom half of the table, I could understand it. If this team starts off next year terrible, I'm sure he'll be on the hot seat, but they should be giving him time, because they could turn into a team that next year challenges for top 4, top 3. They could get back there, and they're not that far away, I don't think.
Right. Let's shift gears now to Napoli. Now, this is a team that really took a week off. They lost big. They lost big to Atalanta. They were resting up for the Coppa Italia. But let me ask you a question. Can Napoli really afford to take weeks off? They are just holding on to that 3rd place spot now. Fiorentina is clawing, even though they took a loss this week in Cagliari. I don't care about Coppa Italia in the sense that you put it over Serie A. Should they have rested these players because they really took a beating to Atalanta this week?
I mean, look, it's it's their right to do whatever they want.
Oh yeah, it's always.
I'm not really. Managers do this stuff all the time. I'm not. I don't necessarily agree with maybe where their priorities are at. They're still 3 points ahead of Fiorentina right now on the even number of games, but it's tight. There's a little bit of distance now between the top two teams and everybody else.
There's starting to be a big distance between Roma and Napoli as well.
But I think, maybe Napoli look at it like, look, we spent big in the off season here. We invested a lot in this team. There were a lot of high hopes this year. We acquitted ourselves relatively well in the Champions League, but didn't get where we wanted to go. We're struggling now in Serie A. I think it's pretty safe to say they're not going to win themselves the Scudetto this year. Maybe they feel like we have to get a trophy, and that trophy, the best chance they see is the Coppa Italia.
Yeah, I see what you mean there, but even though the Champions League, qualification trophy isn't tangible, it is better and shinier than the Coppa Italia trophy, and that should be their goal. Top 3. Don't drop any games for Coppa Italia. Coppa Italia, yes, you get to hoist a cup. You hoisted it a couple of years ago. I get it. I know the importance. I know that was big for Aurelio De Laurentiis to feel that. I'm sure he had a great emotion from that. But making Champions League, not only is it financially better for the club, it's better to bring players in as well. It's better. I'm sure the fans would rather be in Champions League next year, play European competition than to win Coppa Italia this year. I think that's a little short-sighted. So even though it's not a trophy, being in the top 3 of Serie A, even though you don't get to hoist something, pretend that you have a trophy because it's more important than Coppa Italia. I can tell you that.
Well, look at it this way too, though, right? They took a heavy loss. They took a heavy loss to
Atalanta, yeah.
To Atalanta this weekend. They have a difficult tie against Roma now in the Coppa Italia, but a really exciting tie for football fans. They have Milan coming up, which is not not the game it used to be, but it's not an easy game.
It's not an easy stretch for them.
And so look, at the end of the day, Benitez is no stranger to rotating his squad. He did it again here. And maybe he feels like they've still got 3 points, right? They're still in that spot.
Yeah.
They still got 3 points. And now maybe he feels like this gamble might pay off a little bit if they go get a result in Serie A next game against Milan. Now, they've got themselves. They're going to maintain at least that gap, if not widen it. And now they try to maybe they're trying to do both, right? Maybe they're trying to get into that Coppa Italia final. I mean, look, they can beat Roma. They're probably the odds-on favorite to win that trophy, right?
Yeah. I guess you'd have to say that.
So so maybe they feel like they can win that trophy. They can finish third. It's a pretty successful season for Napoli if you finish third and you also win yourself a Coppa Italia. Maybe I think it's just. Benitez has rotated his squad many times before in other competitions. I don't necessarily know. I would give him the benefit of the doubt in that he knows what he's doing, but I think at the end of the day, he made a tactical decision, and I'm sure he wasn't short-sighted enough to just think about that fixture. He understands the next Serie A match they have. He understands they're going to have 2 matches now against Roma within I think a week. So they have 2 matches against Roma and Milan coming up. Maybe this is the time to rest the squad that, for all the depth they have up top, doesn't really have any depth anywhere else.
Right.
And maybe he felt like also, maybe he underestimated Atalanta, but maybe he thought, I'll roll out a second-choice team. We might be able to scrap for a tie. Hell, we might even win. That obviously backfired. Yeah. But maybe that was part of that as well.
Yeah, another thing to mention with Napoli is that Jorginho actually didn't make their Europa League list, which I found as a surprise. I mean, this is a player that they brought in, and I thought it was a great deal in the Mercato this past couple of weeks, probably one of the best deals in the Mercato. So I'm surprised that he didn't make that cut. Anyway, also with Napoli, their flag, their captain, Paolo Cannavaro, on loan to Sassuolo. And, this year I think we saw it coming, right? Was it time? This is a guy that obviously didn't do well in the flat back four that Benitez plays. He's played in that three in the back lineup for most of his time at Napoli with Mazzarri, and he couldn't really find the field this past season. And when he did, he didn't really play all that well. For me, it made sense. I'm just reading some of the comments now. Mazzarri firing at Benitez. And this is actually his brother. Materazzi, sorry, who obviously has a big feud with Benitez dating back from his time at Inter. And actually, Fabio Cannavaro tweeted this out. Good luck, Paolino, and compliments to him who made you feel a stranger in your own home. I think he was talking about Benitez there.
No problem.
It's a shame, right? I mean, this is a player who's represented Napoli for a long time, but if you look at it, I think it was time to move on. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference, right?
Football ultimately, I mean, as much as tradition is nice, it's a bit. I mean, it's a business now more than it is about the tradition and the culture. I mean, that's nice stuff to talk about, but big clubs that are interested in making the Champions League, I mean, you make business decisions to do that, right? You're not going to necessarily try to keep a hometown guy if it doesn't make sense. Now, I personally don't think it made sense. I think he's one of their few reliable defenders.
Well, he's one of their few defenders. So it's not even about reliability. It's just about numbers.
Because I'm not a Napoli supporter and I don't understand that history. The fact that he's like a legend of the club, I understand that. But that doesn't tug at my heartstrings, right. You know what I mean? So I look at it like somebody made a business decision that he was going to go, whether that's due to off-the-field stuff with the manager or whether that's due to his performance on the field, or they thought they could go somewhere else.
You got to think it was hard for Aurelio De Laurentiis, though. This is a guy who really came up with Napoli. Basically, when Napoli was coming into Serie A, he was one of the players, right? He was one of the guys that has carried the flag for the past decade almost. And he's a Neapolitan, just like Aurelio, right? So you got to think it was tough to pull the trigger. And I think Benitez was a lot more behind this than maybe we think.
Sure. I mean, Benitez is the manager, and if he says, I don't want this player, we don't need him or whatever, maybe, that works. But I think De Laurentiis is involved enough in the running of the club that if he really wanted him to stay, he would have stayed. Maybe he didn't want to cause a rift with him and Benitez, but that says to me that he's putting a lot of faith in Rafa Benitez and his ability to manage, right? Because he's saying,
Well, so far he's delivered the goods, I think. Besides not being able to qualify for the next round of Champions League,
they had the
hardest group. And I think we can say that Napoli performed well in Champions League. They're in third place right now. Benitez isn't doing so bad. And it seems like the players are actually kind of believing in Benitez.
I mean, the stuff with Materazzi you can kind of throw out because he hates Benitez.
That doesn't matter. It was just a quote to use.
But the Cannavaro thing I thought was interesting. I mean, the fact that he felt like Benitez kind of alienated him. That's nothing that we really saw. You know what I mean? That's obviously something that happened kind of behind.
But imagine that. Imagine being the captain of this team for years now. This is my team. Right, I wear the blue. I bleed the blue. That I take off my shirt. I still have the blue skin. Right. This has been my team all along. Everybody that comes in respects me because I'm the leader, and everybody understands that. And now Benitez comes in and alienates you. You were up here, and now you feel like scum. You feel like you mean nothing, and you've given so much to the shirt. So much to the people, so much to the fans, the organization, to have one guy come in and completely make you feel like nothing. I absolutely feel for Paolo Cannavaro here. It must be a terrible feeling. But his skills have definitely diminished, and he doesn't play that well in the back four. So it's a toss-up. The fan in me, the lover, I think the lover in me feels sad, right? I'm obviously very upset about this, but I think my head tells me that this is the right move.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's one of those things where, if Napoli wants to play in the Champions League every year, if Napoli wants to challenge for Scudetto every year, then they're making a decision saying we're going to side with the manager that doesn't see him or value him as a player at the club. Benitez is going in there. I don't think he necessarily really cares about how much everybody loves Paulo Cannavaro there. I mean, I'm sure he cares a little bit, but ultimately his job is to win his football matches to keep his job.
Yeah.
And if he feels like Cannavaro's not helping him, he's not going to play him, right? So I think it's just one of those unfortunate things. It's too bad, but that's kind of football.
It is what
football.
it is.
That's football at clubs that are trying to get in the Champions
Yeah,
League. They're going to make harsh decisions. If it's business driven, it's about winning football matches, and it's about getting to the Champions League, continuing to make money so you can continue to challenge. And that's what Napoli's trying to do right now.
That's right. Now let's talk about another squad that was in Champions League. Maybe 2002 era. We're talking about Leeds, and you know a thing or two about Leeds, Noah. Am I right?
I've been told.
Am I right in saying that?
Told I have, yeah.
So right now, we talked about this, I think, 2 weeks ago, maybe even last week, that Cellino, owner of Cagliari, has made a bid to take over Leeds.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been some developments, haven't there?
Yeah, I mean a lot of kind of weird stuff.
Let's talk about what happened this past week.
Over the weekend.
Yeah, over the weekend.
So Leeds had a derby against Huddersfield, and Friday it was kind of, it wasn't officially announced or anything, but it was kind of said that Cellino had gone ahead and they had completed this, or his company had completed this purchase of the 75% stake in Leeds United. Though the deal I don't believe was made official, it was kind of reported that the papers had been signed, basically. And so that night, Brian McDermott, who's the manager of Leeds United, got a call from a lawyer, supposedly calling on Cellino's behalf, saying, you're fired. See you later. So McDermott, I don't know if he tweeted it out, but somehow communicated to the Leeds kind of community and the fans, saying, thank you for the time and all that stuff, kind of saying his goodbye. Obviously didn't go to the game they had on Saturday. The assistant manager took charge. For what it's worth, Leeds won 5-1, so it was a good result. But McDermott was then told after the game, or someone at Leeds kind of after the game came out and said, McDermott isn't fired at all, and no one kind of knew where that came from. Cellino's been kind of quiet about whether it happened or not. There supposedly was kind of a quote. It was more attributed to him, so I can't say if for sure if he said it, but basically saying the first thing they were going to do is fire the manager. So maybe that's still what they're going to do. McDermott's back now, managing the team, because what happened starting this week is that another consortium has come in, fronted by some people that had tried to purchase Leeds, and this was a few years ago when the current owners, Gulf, had been trying to had been competing with them to buy, and it's a group headed up by a few key people that have been kind of around the football business for a while in England. People that used to be chairman of Hull City, and I think someone that used to be associated with Manchester United as well, and then David Hay, who was at Leeds for a little while, and they've been coupled up with this other consortium called Together Leeds, and they're now trying to come in and make this deal with Gulf instead of Cellino. Cellino has said that David Hay's basically pulling some shady stuff here because him and these people with Gulf, who are from Bahrain, I believe, have a deal in place. The papers are signed and it's basically done. And everything's kind of up in the air. Nobody seems to know if this Cellino deal is done for sure. Cellino seems to think it is.
Yeah.
The Gulf people haven't said anything. The Together Leeds people, along with David Hay, seem to think that there's at least enough room for them to come in and try to either outbid or get in front of Cellino for this. Basically what it comes down to is, everybody wants a piece of Leeds United football.
And it feels good, doesn't it? Are you surprised that this many people are interested in the club?
A little bit.
I know this is getting a little away from Serie A, but it's the last
a
few
little
minutes.
bit, yeah. I mean, not because the club has a strong history. I mean, like you said, that it's not been 15 years. I mean, 12 years ago they were going towards the semifinals of the Champions League. And they have a stadium that can be full, 30,000 people. I mean, they have Leeds a big city. It's not it's not a small place. They have the ability to kind of have a big club there. So that doesn't surprise me. But I mean, I wonder how if you see owners come in, especially owners that are not in Chilino's case, and you made a comparison, not exactly a comparison, but mentioned with Flavio Briatore coming over with Queens Park Rangers a few years ago, and kind of the idea that we'll toss a little money in it and things are going to turn around like that. And one of the things about playing in the championship is that you have to be ready to play some just frankly disgusting looking football games. It's not going to be pretty. It's not I don't really necessarily want to see a lot of skillful players come over that aren't invested in going to Doncaster on Wednesday night when it's pissing it down, and you are not really feeling like going out there and playing because the other team's going to just start kicking you if you get by them, because that's what's going to happen. And I want players that are going to be able to do that, because that's how you get results, and I want a manager that's invested in that. And as long as whoever buys them understands that, then I'm on board. But I don't know which of those owners are going to be that. We don't know what Chilino's necessarily going to bring to the table. The whole thing is kind of, it's a little bit just kind of like it's always been the last 5+ years. It's just kind of, there's always been talk of new people coming in. The club's always been kind of looked at as up for sale. So getting that stability is important, and it doesn't look like we've got it yet, but hopefully some clarity comes to that situation soon. And then we can kind of talk about what might happen.
Well, it is exciting indeed, and Noah gets to keep talking about Leeds on the Serie A podcast. So as long as that happens, and Chilino actually owns the club, hey, we can bring up Leeds.
Maybe hopefully Chilino buys and we can keep talking about it.
So I think that ends the Serie A portion of the podcast. Let's get to our grievances or Festivus or whatever we're trying to plug this week. Mike, do we have some sexy music to play?
Let's try this on for size.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sexy.
That'll work.
What?
That'll work, right?
Yeah, it'll do just fine. So what do we got this week, Noah?
I don't know. Do you have a good one?
I do have a good one. It's not a.
Hit me with it.
This isn't a grievance. I could probably come up with a few grievances. Poor Super Bowl for our American listeners or international listeners as well.
Unless you're Seattle.
Poor commercials as well.
You got into it with MLS transfers a little bit.
Got into it with MLS transfers. The people. This is going to be a grievance now. This is going to be a grievance.
Let me tell you though, I love MLS transfers.
MLS transfers, great Twitter handle, and what you do is awesome. I really appreciate it. But the people that are just the soccer fans that are completely ignorant to other sports, especially on the biggest day of the year for football, American football that is, come off it. Come off it. Just accept it. Soccer's a sport. American football's a sport. Let's just, big deal. Big deal. I'm not going to reference, the exact tweet or anything like that, but hey, it is what it is. I'm actually going to promote a documentary. It's on Netflix. Noah mentioned Flavio Briatore. It's actually called The 4-Year Plan, and it documents the takeover of QPR from Flavio Briatore and his group, Bernie Ecclestone, Amit something. And co, exactly. And it's really amazing. All of those rumors you hear about, owners coming in and having their say about what the lineup is and who's being substituted and who should be on the field. It's absolutely true. And text messages from owners to, the sporting staff to get players in and out. It's all true, and it's a phenomenal documentary. I recommend any fan of soccer, be it European, MLS, anything. Great documentary. Please watch. Noah's going to be actually watching tonight, so I'm excited to hear your take on it.
Yeah, it should be. I'll update you next week or next time. Well,
We'll talk about next week. Go ahead. Yeah.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I guess I mean, is there anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so I guess this is something to plug more than it is a grievance. For any soccer fans in the States that are Serie A fans or Serie A and other league fans or whatever, tomorrow morning, I think it's 10 a.m. Eastern time, there's going to be a press conference out of Miami with David Beckham and the MLS commissioner, Don Garber, and the mayor of Miami. Sounds like it's pretty likely that Miami will get confirmed as what will be the 22nd MLS franchise. No other real details, but for anybody that's interested in soccer growing in this country at all, it should be a pretty interesting listen. Maybe some talk about stadium deal or anything like that, and obviously the year they'll begin playing and all that stuff. So it could be pretty interesting, and interesting to see someone like David Beckham getting involved as an owner. I know Simon Fuller also is going to get involved, and they have
cool.
more kind of wealthy owners coming into the league is definitely not a bad thing.
No, for sure.
So that could be good.
I will be in Portland next week, but we'll try to have some sort of a podcast.
Well, me and Mike
maybe
if Mike's recovered.
Yeah, if Mike's recovered, Noah and Mike will be on the podcast next
Otherwise,
week.
it'll just be me.
Also, after this show, Serie A Live, if you're watching the show live, is having their show 10 p.m. Eastern time. That should be great listen. Yeah, in 2 minutes from now. So switch over now. Follow us at Trequartista Pod. Email us. I think we have a P.O. box. Good night.
We have a P.O. box for sure.
Good night, everybody.
Take care.